Cheers, and welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Lauren, and today we are going to be celebrating spooky season by learning about why Friday the 13th is considered unlucky. I am still sick, so I still just have my toddy with me here today. Well, it's not even a toddy, there's no whiskey in it, it's very sad. But in any case, we're celebrating spooky season by a slightly spookier look and also looking at spookier videos. So, I hope you're excited. I certainly am. Let us begin. Why is Friday the 13th considered unlucky? This is from the channel Today I Learned. So.
Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Today I Found Out.
Sorry, Today I Found Out. Today I Found Out. And today we're going to find out why Friday the 13th is considered unlucky. He looks young. This is probably an older video.
In the video today we're answering a viewer question. Paddy Babe 333 asks, why is Friday the 13th considered unlucky or bad? Just before we get started, I will say that this video, it's brought to you by TunnelBear. TunnelBear makes it easy to privately and securely browse a more open internet without harming any bears whatsoever. To try TunnelBear for free, go to tunnelbear.com/brainfood. So, the origins of Friday the 13th being considered an unlucky day aren't perfectly clear, but we do know that both Friday and, separately, the number 13 have long been considered unlucky, and it was around the 19th century that the first documented instances started popping up of people putting the two together to form the unluckiest day of all. To start with, the most popular hypothesis as to why Friday is considered unlucky or an evil day is thought by many to spring from Christianity. By tradition, Friday is considered the day that Eve gave Adam the fruit from the tree of knowledge of...
How would you figure that out? It was a Friday when she gave it to him. What the hell? People just be making all sorts of stuff up. Like, okay, look, I know that there are certain traditions or superstitions out there. Things like, you know, the full moon is like a bad day. Halloween is a bad day for like to get a doctor's appointment or surgery or something. And think people are weirder on the full moon, like things like that, which I've never really held a strong belief in. Or like people are always like, Mercury's in retrograde. I'm like, Mercury seems to always be in retrograde. That's always the explanation. But like even my mom, who is usually not a very superstitious person, she is a nurse, and she's like, no, it's definitely full moons are bad. Full moons are a bad time to be working in the OR. Like the things that go wrong are just so weird. You get the weirdest people. Halloween also, apparently, she's like, yeah, it's a weirder day. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe
good and evil with it.
It might also be confirmation bias there, but just saying. Back to this. How did they decide that it was that Eve gave Adam an apple on Friday? They didn't even call... Days of the week weren't even that.
The fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, with incidentally the specific phrase in Hebrew being thought to figuratively translate to everything rather than the literal translation of good and evil, so there is some debate on whether the author was referring to just moral concepts or all knowledge. Either way, the result was being given the boot from the Garden of Eden. Also by tradition, Adam and Eve were purported to have died on a Friday, the Temple of Solomon is said to have been destroyed on a Friday, and Jesus was traditionally considered to have been crucified on a Friday, the day, though, that we now refer to as Good Friday. Though, interestingly, there are several references in somewhat recent history of Good Friday being considered the one exception to Fridays being bad luck, such as this reference from 1857. Notwithstanding the prejudice against sailing on a Friday, most of the pleasure boats make their first voyage for the season on Good Friday. Others theorize that Friday being unlucky predated Christianity. The name Friday was chosen in honor of the Norse goddess Frigg, wife of Odin. Teutonic people are thought to have considered the day extremely unlucky, especially for weddings, due in part to the lovely goddess the day was named for. Later, the Christian church attempted to demonize the goddess.
I thought she was the goddess of marriage, though. So why would getting married on her day be bad? Maybe I need to do some more research into Norse mythology.
So that may or may not have been a contributing factor. Whatever the case, despite these quite old...
Of course the Christian church tried to demonize their belief. Okay. You know, later the Christian church attempted to demonize the goddess, and that may or not be... Yeah, you know? Shocking. The Christians coming in and ruining things for everybody else.
Contributing factor. Whatever the case, despite these quite old origin theories, well-documented instances of the notion that Friday was popularly considered unlucky among the masses doesn't seem to have popped up until around the mid-17th century. Within the next 2 centuries after that, the idea continued to spread, and by the 19th century was nearly ubiquitous in certain cultures. As for the unluckiness of the number 13, as with Friday, there are numerous possibilities for the origin, the most popular of which also stems from Christianity. It is considered incredibly bad luck to have 13 people sitting at a table for dinner, which is supposedly due to the fact that Judas was traditionally the 13th person to be seated to dine at the Last Supper.
Okay. I can see that. I can see where you'd draw that from then. That I can kind of see where it starts.
However, the Hindus also believed that it was bad luck for 13 people to gather together for any purpose at the same time. Far away in northern Europe, the Vikings of ancient times, they told a similar story. According to the Old Norse myth, 12 gods were feasting at a banquet hall at Valhalla. This is when Loki, the god of mischief, showed up uninvited. This, of course, brought the count of gods up to the dreaded number of 13. Loki then encouraged Hod, the blind god of winter and darkness, to murder Balder the Good with a spear of mistletoe. This threw all of Valhalla into mourning, and once again provided another example of a story in history that congregating with 13 for dinner is a bad idea.
I will say, though, in that particular story, it's like, number one, the god agreed to both Balder and the guy who threw the spear agreed to this trick, because Balder had been like blessed by Frigg by like everything, that nothing could kill him. She like went around the world and like talked to the rocks and like the metals and everything to be like, don't kill my son, and they were all like, okay, sure. But she didn't talk to mistletoe, so Loki was, and like they were bragging about it all up and down the freaking world tree, all up and down Yggdrasil. They were bragging about how Balder can't be killed. So Loki's like, I mean, come on, you have to know that's going to make the trickster god be like, somebody is getting some hubris somewhere, I must strike it down, because that does seem to be a thing that trickster gods do. They like to strike down the hubris of it all, and they all agreed to do this thing, and then Loki was still the one blamed for it, and he was this when he was tied up in the cave with the entrails of his sons and had the snake dripping on him, and then, you know, caused Ragnarok later because of it? Is that what this? I think this was the inciting incident for that.
So why do all these separate religions have such a similar tradition of demonizing the number 13? There are those that hypothesize that the number 13 may have been purposefully denigrated by the founders of the patriarchal religions to eradicate the influence of the mother goddess. In goddess worship cultures, the number 13 was often revered as it represented the number of lunar and menstrual cycles that occur annually. It is believed by those that adhere to this theory that as the 12-month solar calendar came into use over the 13-month lunar calendar, the number 13 itself became suspect.
Oh, so we can blame men and then Christians, which does seem to be kind of a theme throughout history.
It should be noted, though, that not all cultures in the ancient world recoiled at the number 13. The ancient Egyptians believed life was a spiritual journey that unfolded in stages. They believed that 12 of those stages occurred in this life, but last, the 13th, was a joyous transformative ascension to an eternal afterlife. So the number 13 represented death to the Egyptians, but not death as in decay and fear, but as acknowledgement of a glorious and eternal life. Of course, it's always possible the association with death from Egyptian tradition later morphed into death in the unlucky sense in cultures that were influenced by Egypt. As with the notion of Friday being unlucky,
which was so many of them. Like, Egypt influenced so many cultures.
13 being popularly considered unlucky really seemed to gain steam around the 17th and 18th centuries, and by the 19th century in the Western world was likewise extremely widespread in several different cultures. So now the question really becomes, when did Friday and the number 13 join forces like a Reese's peanut buttercup of bad luck in order to terrorize the masses? Well, you'll often read that it is when the Knights Templar were arrested on Friday, October 13th, 1307. However, that origin story is a modern notion with no basis in documented history. Others point to the last day of King Harold II's reign on Friday, October the 13th, 1066. William of Normandy gave him the opportunity to relinquish his crown, which he refused. The next day, William took it by force at the Battle of Hastings, causing Harold's demise. Again, it is a modern idea that this is where the first Friday the 13th came from. It perhaps isn't surprising, given that both Friday and 13 didn't reach their unlucky zenith until the 19th century, that it wasn't until around the mid-19th century that the two were put together as the ultimate unlucky day. One of the earliest references to this comes from a club formed by William Fowler. Fowler set out to prove that these sorts of superstitions are absolutely baseless. He thus formed a club known as the 13 Club, in which club members would meet together in groups of 13 to dine. And yes, they held their first ever get-together on Friday the 13th in January of 1881. To thumb their noses even further at fate, they had club members walk under a ladder before sitting down to a table in room number 13 of the building they were in.
Amazing. Did they have black cats running around too? That's fantastic.
They also made sure they had plenty of spilled salt on the table before they dined. A slightly earlier document.
Spilled salt? Did someone break a mirror? Like, I need to know. Inquiring minds need to know. What did they do?
Documented reference comes from 1869 in the biography of Rossini, where the author, Henry Sutherland Edwards, notes, he, Rossini, was surrounded to the last by admiring friends, and if it be true that, like so many Italians, he regarded Fridays as an unlucky day and 13 as an unlucky number, it is remarkable that one Friday the 13th of November, he died. It should be noted here that traditionally in Italy, Friday the 13th was not considered unlucky, with 13 often being considered a lucky number there until extremely recently, when Western European and American influence started to change that.
You're welcome, Italy, America. Again, patriarchal Christians. America was based on it, but like, that is kind of funny that America was like already putting their, like, whatever this was. He said recently, I'm not sure what he's considering recently, but like, America, you know, it is kind of funny. Because in America, a lot of office buildings and like hotels and stuff don't have a 13th floor. They skip from 12 to 14 because 13 is considered so unlucky. I just think that's funny.
For Italians, classically, 17 was the unlucky number, and thus Friday the 17th became the Italian version of Friday the 13th. Nevertheless, Henry Sutherland Edwards was British, so though he was writing about an Italian composer, he applied his own superstition to Rossini.
That's kind of funny too, because he's like, if like all the Italians, he considered Friday to be a bad day and 13 to be an unlucky number, this composer died on Friday the 13th. It's like, but the Italian guy didn't care. That was you. All Italians. Ugh.
In any event, the notion of Friday the 13th being the unluckiest of the unlucky picked up steam around this point, and once we got into the early 20th century, there are numerous documented instances of people referencing it in this way, such as the 1907 novel by stockbroker Thomas W. Lawson called Friday the 13th, which told of a stockbroker's efforts to destroy the market on that ominous day. Alright, so apart from the Friday the 13th film franchise, what makes Friday the 13th stick so stubbornly in our collective consciousness? Psychologists point to the fact that if anything negative happens on that specific date, people make a permanent association between the event and that date in their minds,
confirmation bias.
Conveniently forgetting all those times that Friday the 13th has passed uneventfully. In short,
or all those times that something similar has happened on a day not Friday the 13th.
For those who believe in this superstition, where they cite instances where it came true, is a classic example of confirmation bias. And now for a bonus fact. The Dutch Centre for Insurance Statistics in 2008 attempted to prove that Friday the 13th was no different from any other day. They ended up demonstrating the opposite, in fact. From their results, they found that Friday the 13th is actually a slightly safer day to drive than other days, at least using 2 years' worth of data from 2006 to 2008 in the Netherlands. In that span, there was an average of 7,500 traffic accidents on days that were both Friday and the 13th of the month. On Fridays that didn't line up with the 13th, there was actually an average of 7,800 accidents each day. Their hypothesis is simply that, due to the phobia, less people drive on Friday the 13th, and people are simply more careful when they do. They also found similar trends with reported fires and crimes, with less happening on Fridays that coincide with the 13th of the month. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. Now it's my pleasure to get to tell you about Tunnel Bear. So the internet, it's got some shady characters out there. There are people that want to steal your information and buy things online or do other nefarious things. Or maybe they just want to spy on you, whatever. Well, protect yourself from criminals, from spies, and from advertisers. I mean, those guys can be a pain too. Tunnel Bear allows you to do all of this. It's an easy to use and super secure VPN. You can set it up in seconds, you can install it on 5 devices with 1 membership, and your privacy is taken incredibly seriously. Get a free trial with no credit card required by going to tunnelbear.com/brainfood. Again, going through that link does support this show. It's tunnelbear.com/brainfood. Click on it in the description below as well. Thank you very much. And as always, thank you for watching.
Okay. I don't know exactly when this was. This was 5 years ago, so I don't know if Tunnel Bear is still a thing. I've certainly never heard about it until just now. But, fantastic. I feel like I maybe learned some stuff. I learned some stuff about Friday the 13th. And again, I also didn't learn other things. I feel like I get a little bit too sassy about like, the ways that Christians in history have, changed how the entire world tends to view things. I definitely get a little flippant about it, I think. But you know, I'm sorry. I don't mean to like insult anybody. Like if you are a Christian, it's not meant to be a slight against you, but it's a slight against history, I guess. This is how history works, you know? It's like the power of hindsight is just like, yes, these people, they messed up a lot of stuff. They made things a lot worse for a lot of people in a lot of ways. And that's just true. That doesn't mean that, you know, people who practice any kind of religion are bad in any kind of way. So I'm not trying to say anything bad about religion. Or Christians or anything. I am going to say something bad about the patriarchy because patriarchy sucks. Equality for all. Especially as I'm dressed like a witch today. Anyway, sorry about my little rant. I hope you all learned something about Friday the 13th. And again, happy Friday the 13th. I hope you have an excellent day and there is no bad luck for you to be found. I think sometimes there's cheap tattoos or something on Friday the 13th. And this is an October Friday the 13th, which makes it exciting. Anyway, sorry for the rant. Take a peek at our membership page. You can help us support our channel through that. And let me know what you would like me to react to next. I will see you in the next video.